voter fraud is very, very rare in our country, but there are a few instances of it here and there, usually affecting a single vote. And the few instances of it that do turn up from time to time, they're usually ridiculous. And all of those instances that I just described from 2020, all of those Republicans, all of them got off with basically a slap on the wrist for their crimes. The dude in 40 Fort, Pennsylvania, prosecutors dropped the most serious charges against him. They're working out a plea deal. The guy who voted for his long dead, dozen years dead mother, swearing she was still alive, he got 5 years probation. The local Republican elected official in Ohio who voted for his dead father, he got jail time. He got 3 days in jail and a $500 fine. And it is worth keeping that context in mind when you also remember the case of Crystal Mason. We've talked before on the show about the case of Crystal Mason. In 2016, she went to her local polling place in Tarrant County, Texas, to vote. She discovered her name was not on the voting rolls there. So at the suggestion of a poll worker, Ms. Mason filled out a provisional ballot. She was told, basically, we're not sure what the problem is, but fill out this provisional ballot. That way, if there is any real problem here, we won't count it. But provisionally, you can cast this vote in case we can sort out whatever seems to be the matter. A few months after that experience, Crystal Mason was arrested and charged with illegal voting because when she filled out that provisional ballot, she was on supervised release after completing a prison sentence for federal conviction. And she thought, because she had served her time in prison, that she was eligible to vote. She did not know that under Texas law, you're not eligible to vote unless you've also completed any probation or any supervised release after release from prison. She did not know that. Even though that was a technical misunderstanding, and even though she cast a provisional ballot, and even though her provisional ballot was never counted, she nevertheless was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison, 5 years hard time, for illegal voting. So if you are a Republican white guy engaged in an elaborate premeditated scheme to deliberately cast a dead person's vote for Donald Trump, even though you know that person's dead and it's illegal, all is forgiven. Probation, perhaps a small fine. But if you are Crystal Mason in Texas trying to vote because she does not know she is not eligible, she's only not eligible on a technicality. And in fact, her vote is never counted, 5 years in prison. Now, you may remember us talking about Ms. Mason's case on this show before. It sticks in your mind, right? Because it is so sort of egregious on its face, particularly egregious in context. Now it looks like, again, in the state of Texas, it may be happening again. This story starts on primary day in Texas last year, so not the general election. This was actually Super Tuesday, the day that 15 different states and territories held their presidential primaries, including Texas, March 3rd last year. And the turnout on Super Tuesday last year was massive. Harris County, Texas, home to the state's largest city of Houston, Harris County was not prepared for the huge turnout on Super Tuesday last March. There were crazy long lines at lots of polling places, particularly in heavily minority communities. People in those communities had to wait hours to vote in many circumstances. And that was when the nation met a man named Hervis Rogers. Mr. Rogers was the last person in line at the polling site on Texas Southern University's campus that night. That's him, the bald guy there in the white shirt, right on the other side of that glass door. Hervis Rogers worked 2 jobs. He got to the polling site just before polls closed at 7 p.m. to cast his ballot in the presidential primary. But in the end, it took him 6 hours and 20 minutes to get to the front of the line and cast his ballot. He finally walked out of that polling place after 1:30 in the morning. According to some reports, he may have been the last person in the entire state of Texas to cast a vote that night. Again, he waited in line more than 6 hours. He told reporters after it was all over that it was worth it. He felt good. He also said, though, that he'd been there so long, he had to go get ready for his next shift, for his next job.
And what's next for the night?
Well, I'm finna get ready and go to work.
Got to get ready and go to work after 6 hours online to vote. So a couple things came out of that 2020 primary day in Texas. For one, Hervis Rogers became a little bit of the story of the day, became sort of a one news cycle mini celebrity because his persistence and dedication were so impressive. Also because no American should have to be so persistent and so dedicated in order to just cast a vote. The other thing that happened in the wake of that was that the county clerk who oversaw that voting debacle on Super Tuesday last March in Texas, that county clerk apologized and resigned. And just as Republican legislators gather in the Texas Capitol now for this special session to roll back voting rights, and to make it extra special, just as former President Donald Trump and Trump-esque Republicans from all across the country gathered up the road in Dallas for the annual CPAC convention, just as all that is happening in Texas, today comes word from Texas that Hervis Rogers has been arrested. He has been arrested by the Republican Attorney General of Texas for illegal voting. Turns out when Hervis Rogers waited over 6 hours to vote in March of 2020, on Super Tuesday, he was a few months short of the end of his parole for an old burglary conviction in the 90s. He's been out of prison for more than 15 years, but his parole did not technically end until last June. Remember, he voted in the primary in March. Texas Attorney General has now charged Hervis Rogers with 2 counts of illegal voting, alleging that he voted in the 2018 general election as well. We do not know at this point whether this was an honest mistake on Hervis Rogers' part. Perhaps he did not know he was not allowed to vote. We don't know. That said, perhaps it was a deliberate, premeditated scheme to wait over 6 hours in line to vote in a Democratic primary in order to break the law on purpose. Mwahaha. We do not know what Mr. Rogers has to say about any of this. We can't ask him, because the Attorney General of Texas has locked up Hervis Rogers on $100,000 bail. He's in prison tonight, unable to pay $100,000 bail. Bail is set at $100,000. What? Because he might escape and vote again? Also, I should tell you this. Hervis Rogers lives in Harris County, the big, diverse county that includes Houston that I just told you about, right? Hervis Rogers lives in Harris County. He voted in Harris County. But the Texas Attorney General has chosen to file these charges against him in neighboring Montgomery County. We asked the Attorney General's office why they filed these charges in that other county. They told us essentially because we can. They told us the laws allow them to file these charges in any county that abuts Harris County if they want to. They wouldn't tell us why they picked Montgomery County to press these charges specifically. I can tell you, though, that according to the most recent U.S. Census data, of the 8 possible counties that abut Harris County, of the 8 possible counties they could legally have charged Hervis Rogers in, of the 8 counties from which they have the option of drawing a jury pool if this case goes to trial, Montgomery County is just about the whitest. It has the lowest proportion of African-American residents of any of those counties. I mean, I can't tell you for certain that that is relevant there, but I can tell you that it's true. The Attorney General's office, we went back to them again. They will not tell us why they chose this county. I'll also tell you that the ACLU of Texas has put out a strong statement on this tonight. It says, quote, "The arrest and prosecution of Mr. Hervis Rogers should alarm all Texans. He waited in line for over 6 hours to vote to fulfill what he believed to be his civic duty. He's now locked up on a bail amount that most people could not afford. He faces potentially decades in jail. Our laws should not intimidate people from voting by increasing the risk of prosecution for at worst innocent mistakes. We will continue to fight for justice and for Mr. Rogers, and will push back against efforts to further restrict voting rights." If only he had been a white guy casting a vote in the name of a dead relative for Donald Trump, right? Can't we all agree that that's the way that... I will also tell you that the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, has put out his own statement tonight, sort of, at least he has tweeted. He refers to a local public radio news article that broke the news of Hervis Rogers' arrest as, quote, "this liberal NPR article." Ken Paxton says, quote, Hervis is a felon rightly barred from voting under Texas law. I prosecute voter fraud everywhere we find it. And Ken Paxton prosecutes it whenever he wants to as well, it would seem, and wherever he wants to. The alleged illegal voting Hervis Rogers is accused of took place almost a year and a half ago. It's not like he was hiding it. Like I said, he was a national media figure for a hot minute, because he had to cast his vote after that 6+ hour wait before heading off to his other job. But apparently this is the moment to arrest him, to lock him up on $100,000 bail, and to bring charges against him that could put him in jail for decades. This is the moment. For some reason, now. It had to happen today. As Republican legislators gather in the Texas state capitol to try to make it harder for Texans who would look like Hervis Rogers to vote. And just in time for Ken Paxton to give his big headliner speech at CPAC this weekend in Dallas, just before Donald Trump takes the stage there. I should also tell you, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton himself is under indictment on securities fraud charges in the state of Texas, has been for years. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is currently under FBI investigation for abusing his office to allegedly benefit a wealthy campaign donor, an elaborate scheme that was so egregious and over the top, 7 of Paxton's top deputies in the Attorney General's office reported him to law enforcement authorities. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is currently under investigation by the Texas State Bar to determine whether his efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election based on bogus fraud claims amount to professional misconduct that should result in him losing his law license. Remember when he tried to get the United States Supreme Court to toss out other states' presidential votes for Biden and declare Donald Trump the winner? Yeah, forge your dead parent's signature in order to vote for Trump. Slap on the wrist, maybe. Try to overturn a whole democratically decided election, you get to be Attorney General of Texas, even if you're already under indictment. But wait in line for over 6 hours to cast a vote a few weeks before your parole is up. You get locked up with bail you cannot possibly pay. Charged in a county that seems designed to ensure an all-white jury for you, threatened with decades in prison. Seems to be where we are tonight.